In the vast emptiness of space, where stars whispered secrets to the void, Captain Jace Harlan hurtled through the cosmos in his battered fighter ship, the *Stellar Fury*. He was no ordinary pilot. He was a rogue from Earth's distant colonies, a man whose life had been a tapestry of daring escapes and heart-pounding pursuits. With a jaw set like forged steel and eyes that held the fire of 1,000 suns, Jace had always thrived on the edge, where danger danced with destiny. But on this fateful day, as his ship screamed through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet, he knew he was in trouble, real, gut-wrenching trouble. Alarms blared in the cockpit, red lights flashing like angry eyes. Hull integrity at 20%, the AI voice droned, its calm tone mocking his rising panic. Jace gripped the controls, muscles straining against the G-forces as he wrestled the vessel toward what looked like a barren desert below. The planet, a forsaken rock in the Zerian sector, was a sea of endless dunes under twin suns that baked everything to a crisp. No signs of life, no beacons, just sand and silence. His engines sputtered, flames licking the wings as he plummeted. "Come on, baby, hold together," he muttered through gritted teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. The impact was cataclysmic. The *Stellar Fury* slammed into the sand with a thunderous roar, carving a fiery trench across the wasteland. Metal groaned and twisted, sparks flying like shooting stars. Jace was thrown forward, his harness biting into his shoulders, but he was alive, bruised, battered, but breathing. He kicked open the hatch, coughing as hot air rushed in, carrying the scent of scorched earth. Stumbling out, he surveyed the wreckage. His ship was a mangled corpse, irreparable without tools he didn't have. Water rations, minimal, food, enough for a week maybe, and weapons, just his sidearm and a survival knife. He was stranded, alone on this god-forsaken world, but Jace wasn't one to wallow. Born on the rugged frontiers of human expansion, he'd learned early that survival was about grit and ingenuity. He scavenged what he could from the wreck, scrap metal for shelter, a solar panel for power, and a few emergency flares. The suns beat down mercilessly, turning the sand into a shimmering oven. He trudged forward, his boots sinking into the dunes, driven by a faint hope. Scans before the crash had shown an anomaly, a blip of moisture in this arid hell. An oasis, perhaps. It was a long shot, but long shots were his specialty. Hours blurred into a haze of exhaustion. The heat miraged the horizon, playing tricks on his eyes. His throat burned, lips cracked, but he pushed on, one foot in front of the other. And then, as the larger sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, he crested a massive dune and froze. Below him lay a hidden valley, cradled between rocky outcrops, where a river glowed with an ethereal blue light. It wasn't just water, it pulsed like a living vein, reflecting the fading light in waves of luminescence. Palm-like trees with silver leaves fringed its banks, and strange flowers bloomed in vibrant purples and blues, defying the desert's cruelty. But it wasn't the oasis that stole his breath. There, in the shallow pools where the river widened, were 4 figures, women or something akin to them, bathing under the twilight sky. Their skin was pale as moonlight, almost translucent, glowing faintly in the river's light. Long, flowing hair as white as fresh snow cascaded down their backs, framing faces of otherworldly beauty. High cheekbones, luminous eyes that shifted colors like opals, and small, pointed ears that twitched delicately, like those of ancient elves from Earth's old myths. Their bodies were lithe and curvaceous, curves accentuated by the sheer, silken garments that clung to them, wetly garments that seemed woven from stardust, elegant yet revealing, hinting at the grace and power beneath. Jace's heart pounded, not just from the trek, but from the sheer impossibility of the scene. Who were they? Survivors? Natives? His mind raced with questions, but instinct kicked in. He ducked behind a rock, observing quietly. The eldest, whom he would later learn was Lyra, moved with regal poise, her laughter like tinkling chimes as she splashed water at her sisters. Zara, the fiery one, retaliated with a playful wave, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Nara, more reserved, lounged on a smooth stone, her form a perfect blend of strength and softness, while Vexa, the youngest, dove into the depths, emerging with a glow that matched the river's. They spoke in a melodic language, fluid and harmonious like a song carried on the wind. Jace couldn't understand a word, but the tone was intimate, sisterly, full of warmth and secrets shared. He felt like an intruder, yet he couldn't tear his eyes away. In that moment, amid the alien wilderness, he was captivated not just by their beauty, but by the vulnerability they exuded in this hidden sanctuary. Little did he know, these were no ordinary beings. They were the last heirs of Zerathia, a fallen empire that once spanned stars, now reduced to fugitives hiding from a tyrannical overlord who had usurped their throne. As the smaller sun set, casting long shadows, one of them, Zara, tilted her head, her pointed ears perking up. Had she sensed him, Jace held his breath, his hand inching toward his sidearm. But instead of alarm, her lips curved into a curious smile, and she whispered something to her sisters. They turned as one, their eyes locking onto his hiding spot with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Not fear, but intrigue. Invitation, even. Jace stepped out slowly, hands raised in peace. "I come in peace," he said, his voice rough from dehydration. "I'm lost, crashed here, not here to harm anyone." The sisters exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of wariness and fascination. Lyra, stepping forward as the leader, approached him with a grace that made the sand seem to part before her. Up close, her scent was intoxicating, like wildflowers mixed with ozone after a storm. "Human," she murmured in accented English, her voice a velvet caress. How did she know his language? Telepathy? Ancient tech? Questions swirled, but her gaze held him captive. "You're far from your stars, wanderer," she continued, her eyes tracing his rugged form, the stubble on his chin, the sweat-streaked flight suit hugging his athletic build. "This place is sacred to us, but perhaps fate has brought you here for a reason." Jace swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. In that instant, he knew his life had changed forever. Survival wasn't just about shelter anymore. It was about alliance, about hearts entwined across the cosmos. As the glowing river hummed softly behind them, he felt the pull of something deeper, a bond forged in the fires of isolation and desire. He spent that first night by the oasis, under their watchful eyes. They shared fruits from the silver trees, sweet, juicy orbs that quenched his thirst like nothing on earth. In return, he offered stories of his adventures, his voice weaving tales of human resilience that made their eyes widen with awe. Lyra listened intently, her hand brushing his arm accidentally, or was it sending sparks through his skin? Zara teased him with questions about Earthmen, her laughter light and flirtatious, while Nara observed quietly, her gaze lingering on his strong hands as he sketched plans for a shelter in the sand. Vexa, the boldest, splashed water at him playfully, inviting him to join their ritual bath, though he declined with a chuckle, his cheeks warming. As dawn broke, Jace set to work building his hideout. Using salvaged metal and local vines, he constructed a sturdy dome near the river's edge, ingenious in its simplicity. Solar panels angled to catch the dual suns, a filtration system drawing from the glowing water. The sisters watched, fascinated by his human ingenuity, no magic, no advanced tech, just clever hands and a sharp mind. "Your kind builds from nothing," Nara said softly, helping him tie a beam. Her touch was cool, electric, stirring feelings he hadn't expected, but danger lurked beyond the valley. Whispers from the sisters revealed their plight. Zerathia, their homeworld, had fallen to Lord Draven, a ruthless overlord whose fleets darkened the skies. They were the royal sisters, exiled heirs, guardians of ancient secrets that could topple his regime. Hiding here in this forsaken desert, they plotted in shadows, but alone they were vulnerable. Jace's arrival changed everything. As he fortified their oasis, turning it into a haven, bonds deepened. Evenings by the river became intimate confessions, Lyra sharing the weight of her crown, her white hair glowing under starlight as she leaned close. Zara's playful banter turned to lingering glances, her body brushing his in accidental ways that set his blood aflame. Nara's quiet strength complemented his, their hands working in sync, while Vexa's energy brought joy, her laughter echoing as she pulled him into dances under the moons. Yet, tension simmered. One night, as a sandstorm raged outside, they huddled in his shelter. The air was thick with unspoken desires. Lyra's eyes met his, full of longing. "Humans are so vital," she whispered, her fingers tracing his jaw. Jace's heart raced. He was no stranger to passion, but this was cosmic, forbidden. He pulled her close, their lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of stars and secrets, a spark that ignited something profound. But as their alliance blossomed, scouts from Draven's forces drew near. Distant engines hummed on the horizon, a threat to their fragile paradise. Jace, with his pilot's cunning, devised traps using the desert's own fury, hidden pits, EMP bursts from his ship's remnants. The sisters, with their ethereal powers, telekinetic whispers and energy shields, complemented his plans perfectly. In the quiet moments, romance wove through the peril. Zara confessed her fascination with human emotions, her body pressing against his in the shelter's dim light, exploring curiosities that blurred lines between species. "Show me," she breathed, and Jace, ever the hero, obliged with gentleness, their connection a bridge across worlds. As the first skirmish loomed, Jace stood tall, the sisters at his side. He was no longer just a lost pilot. He was their protector, their lover, the human spark that would reignite Zerathia's flame. The rebellion was brewing, and in this alien wilderness, love and war intertwined like the river's glowing veins. The desert night pulsed with a restless energy, the twin moons casting silver light over the oasis where Jace Harlan and the four sisters of Zerathia stood on the precipice of something extraordinary. The air still hummed with the echo of their kiss. Lyra's lips, soft as starlight, had ignited a fire in Jace that burned hotter than the suns above. Yet, the distant rumble of engines, faint but growing, reminded him that their sanctuary was no longer safe. Lord Draven's scouts were closing in, their presence a shadow creeping across the dunes, threatening to shatter this fragile paradise. But in the shelter's dim glow, as the sandstorm's howls softened to a whisper, the tension wasn't just about survival. It was something deeper, more primal, weaving through the glances and touches that passed between Jace and the sisters. Lyra stood closest, her white hair shimmering like a cascade of moonlight. Her eyes locked on Jace with a mixture of regal command and unspoken yearning. The sheer fabric of her gown clung to her curves, damp from the river's mist, outlining a body that seemed crafted from dreams. "We cannot stay hidden forever," she said, her voice low, a velvet thread that pulled Jace closer despite the danger. "Draven's forces will find us, but with you, human, we might stand a chance." Her fingers brushed his arm, lingering just long enough to send a jolt through his skin, a promise of something more if they could survive the night. Zara, ever the firebrand, leaned against the shelter's wall, her lips curled in a teasing smile. Her pointed ears twitched, catching every sound, the hum of the oasis, the creak of Jace's makeshift dome, the rapid beat of his heart. "You're bold for a stranded flyboy," she purred, stepping closer, her hips swaying with a confidence that was both playful and predatory. "Building a home in our wilderness, kissing our sister. What else do you plan to claim?" Her words were laced with mischief, but her eyes, glinting like emeralds, held a challenge that made Jace's breath catch. She reached out, trailing a finger down his chest, the touch light but electric, stirring desires he fought to keep in check. Nara, quieter but no less captivating, sat cross-legged on a woven mat, her gaze fixed on the glowing river visible through the shelter's open flap. Her silken dress hugged her form, accentuating the gentle curve of her waist, and her white hair spilled over her shoulders like a waterfall. "The river speaks to us," she murmured, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. "It sensed you before we did, Jace. A human, yet it calls you. Kin." Her words hung in the air, mysterious, pulling him into the enigma of their world. When she looked at him, her opal eyes held a depth that made him feel exposed, as if she saw not just his body but his soul. Vexa, the youngest, bounded over with an energy that defied the tension. Her damp hair clung to her neck, and her gown, barely more than a whisper of fabric, revealed the lithe strength of her frame. "Come on, Jace, you're one of us now," she said, grabbing his hand and tugging him toward the river. Her touch was warm, her laughter infectious, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity in her gaze, a question about what it meant to be so close to a human. "Show us more of your earth tricks," she teased, her fingers lingering in his palm, her proximity a spark that threatened to ignite. Jace felt the weight of their attention, 4 pairs of eyes that saw him not just as a survivor but as something more, a catalyst, a hero, perhaps even a lover. His shelter, cobbled together from salvaged metal and desert vines, stood sturdy against the fading storm, a testament to human ingenuity. But it was the sisters who made this place feel alive, their presence filling the air with a heady mix of danger and desire. He cleared his throat, trying to focus. "We need a plan," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Those engines, they're not far. If Draven's scouts find us, we're done for." Lyra nodded, stepping closer until her breath warmed his cheek. "Our powers are strong here, tied to the river's energy," she said, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "But we are few, and Draven's forces are many. Your mind, Jace, your human cunning could tip the scales." Her touch was a quiet fire, and as she spoke, her body pressed subtly against his, a deliberate intimacy that made his pulse race. He wanted to pull her closer, to lose himself in the promise of her lips again, but the distant hum of engines kept him grounded. Zara circled them, her movements fluid, almost feline. "Oh, I like a man who thinks on his feet," she said, her voice dripping with suggestion. She stopped behind him, her fingers brushing the back of his neck, sending shivers down his spine. "Tell me, flyboy, what's it like to face death and still want this?" She leaned in, her lips grazing his ear, her words a whisper that felt like a caress. Jace's jaw tightened, her boldness was disarming, but he couldn't deny the heat her touch ignited. Nara rose, gliding to his side, her presence calming yet intense. "The river's power can shield us, but only for a time," she said, her hand finding his, her fingers cool and soft. "We need your strength, Jace, not just your machines, but you." Her touch was different from Zara's, less playful, more profound, as if she were anchoring him to this alien world. He squeezed her hand gently, feeling a connection that went beyond words, a silent vow to protect her. Vexa, never one for stillness, tugged at his arm again. "Come see the river up close," she urged, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's not just water, it's alive. Maybe it'll tell us how to fight." Her enthusiasm was contagious, but her closeness, the way her body brushed against his as she pulled him outside, stirred a different kind of heat. The river glowed brighter now, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. Outside, the air was cool, the storm's last whispers fading. The sisters led him to the river's edge, where the water shimmered like liquid starlight. Lyra knelt, dipping her fingers into the glow, and the river responded, flaring brighter. "This is the heart of Zerathia," she explained, her voice reverent. "It holds our ancestors' memories, their strength, but Draven seeks to drain it to wield its power for himself." Her eyes met Jace's, and in them, he saw not just a queen but a woman who needed him, not just as a warrior, but as something more. Zara slipped into the water, her gown floating around her like a cloud. "Join us, Jace," she called, her voice a siren's song. "The river cleanses more than the body." Her smile was wicked, inviting, and as she moved, the water clung to her curves, accentuating every line. Jace hesitated, his survival instincts warring with the pull of her gaze. He was a pilot, a man of action, not a poet lost in passion. But here, under alien skies, the lines blurred. Nara's hand on his arm steadied him. "You don't have to fight alone," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. Her touch was a lifeline, grounding him even as his senses swam. Vexa splashed water at him, laughing, and the droplets caught the moonlight, sparkling like diamonds. "Come on, hero," she teased, her voice light but her eyes heavy with curiosity, as if she were testing the boundaries of their connection. Jace took a step forward, his boots sinking into the soft earth by the river. He didn't dive in, not yet, but he felt the river's pull, its energy humming through him. The sisters surrounded him, their presence a heady mix of power and allure, each touch and glance weaving a spell he couldn't resist. Lyra's hand found his again, her fingers intertwining with his, and she leaned close, her lips brushing his ear. "Stay with us, Jace," she whispered. "Fight with us, be ours." The words sent a shiver through him, a promise of battles and bonds yet to come. But the distant engines grew louder, a stark reminder of the threat beyond the dunes. Jace's mind raced, plotting traps and defenses, but his heart was caught in the sisters' orbit. As the river glowed and the night deepened, he knew he was no longer just a lost pilot. He was a man entangled in a dance of danger and desire, with 4 alien sisters who might just change the fate of the stars. The scouts were closer now, their lights flickering on the horizon. Jace and the sisters exchanged a look, a silent pact forged in the heat of the moment. Whatever came next, they would face it together, human and alien, bound by survival and something far more intoxicating. The night air thrummed with a tension that wrapped around Jace Harlan and the 4 sisters of Zerathia like a tightening coil. The glowing river pulsed at their feet, its light casting their shadows long and wavering across the oasis, as if the planet itself held its breath. Lyra's whispered promise, "Be ours," still echoed in Jace's ears, her fingers still laced with his, warm and electric. Zara's teasing gaze lingered on him, her wet gown clinging to her curves, while Nara's quiet strength anchored him, her hand a steady presence on his arm. Vexa's playful energy danced in the air, her laughter fading as the distant hum of engines grew into a menacing growl. The scouts of Lord Draven, the tyrant who had stolen Zerathia's throne, were no longer a distant threat. They were here, their lights slicing through the darkness like blades. Jace's pilot instincts kicked into overdrive. His eyes scanned the horizon, catching the glint of metal skimmers, sleek, predatory machines hovering low over the dunes, their searchlights sweeping the desert. "They're close," he said, his voice low but steady, the kind of calm that came from years of dodging death in dogfights. "We've got minutes, maybe less." He turned to the sisters, their luminous eyes reflecting both fear and defiance. "Tell me everything you know about these scouts. Weapons, numbers, weaknesses." Lyra stepped forward, her regal poise unshaken despite the danger. Her white hair glowed faintly, catching the river's light, and her voice was a blade wrapped in silk. "Draven's scouts are drones, controlled by a central AI. They're fast, armed with plasma lances and shielded, but their sensors are tuned for heat signatures, not the river's energy." Her gaze hardened, locking onto Jace's. "We can mask ourselves here, but not for long. They'll find the shelter soon. Zara smirked, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face, her body language defiant despite the odds. Let them come, she said, her voice dripping with bravado. I've fried drones before. A little telekinetic push, and they're scrap. She flexed her fingers, and a faint shimmer rippled through the air, a hint of the power she wielded. But her eyes flicked to Jace, a spark of curiosity in them, as if she wondered how this human would face the storm. Nara's voice cut through, soft but urgent. The river can amplify our abilities, she said, kneeling by the water's edge. She dipped her hand into the glowing current, and the river flared, sending a pulse of light that made the air hum. But it takes focus, and we're not warriors, not like you. Her gaze met his, and in it, Jace saw a trust that stirred something deep within him, a need to protect, to prove humanity's worth in this alien world. Vexa, ever restless, darted to a nearby rock, peering over the dune's crest. 3 skimmers, she whispered, her pointed ears twitching. Maybe a dozen drones, they're circling like predators sniffing blood. She turned to Jace, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. What do we do, Flyboy? You're the hero here, right? Her words were half tease, half plea, and the way her body leaned toward him, close enough to feel her warmth, sent a jolt through his already racing heart. Jace's mind worked like a starship's nav computer, calculating odds, plotting moves. The shelter was defensible but exposed. The river's energy was their ace, but untested in combat. And the sisters, powerful, yes, but untrained, their abilities raw and unpredictable. He crouched, pulling a stick to sketch in the sand. We draw them in, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through him. Use the river's glow to blind their sensors. I've got EMP charges from the Stellar Fury's wreck, crude, but they'll short-circuit the drones if we time it right. Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile, admiration flickering in her eyes. You think like a hunter, she said, her voice low, intimate as she knelt beside him, her shoulder brushing his. The contact was fleeting but electric, a reminder of the kiss they'd shared, now layered with the urgency of survival. We'll follow your lead, Jace. Show us how humans fight. The plan came together in a rush of whispered strategy. Jace rigged the EMP charges around the oasis, hidden beneath silver-leaf trees, their triggers linked to a remote he clutched tightly. Zara and Vexa scouted the perimeter, their telekinetic pulses creating faint distortions to confuse the drone's sensors. Nara stood by the river, her hands submerged, channeling its energy into a shimmering veil that cloaked the shelter. Lyra stayed at Jace's side, her presence a steady flame, her hand grazing his as they worked, each touch a spark that threatened to ignite despite the looming battle. The skimmers closed in, their lights now blinding, their engines a deafening roar. Jace's heart pounded, but his hands were steady as he activated the first trap. A pulse of EMP erupted, and one skimmer veered wildly, crashing into a dune with a fiery explosion that lit the night. The sisters gasped, their eyes wide with awe at the human's ingenuity. Nice shot, Vexa whooped, her laughter wild, but it was cut short as the remaining drones zeroed in, their plasma lances firing bolts that scorched the sand. Down, Jace shouted, tackling Lyra to the ground as a lance seared overhead, singeing the air. Her body pressed against his, soft yet strong, her breath hot against his neck. For a heartbeat, time slowed, their eyes locked, her lips inches from his, desire flaring even amid chaos. Stay with me, he whispered, and she nodded, her fingers digging into his arm, a silent vow. Zara and Vexa unleashed their powers, sending telekinetic waves that knocked drones off course, metal screeching as they collided. Nara's veil held, deflecting shots, but it flickered under the onslaught. I can't hold it much longer, she cried, her voice strained, her body trembling with effort. Jace sprinted to her, sliding across the sand to brace her, his hands on her shoulders. You've got this, he said, his voice firm, grounding her. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the world was just them, human and alien, united in defiance. The battle escalated, a whirlwind of light and sound. Jace detonated another EMP, frying half the drones, but the remaining skimmers adapted, their AI learning fast. One launched a missile, and Jace dove, shoving Vexa out of the way as it exploded near the shelter, showering them with debris. She clung to him, her body shaking but her eyes fierce. You're insane, human, she breathed, her lips brushing his cheek, a fleeting touch that sent his blood racing. Then, a shock, a new skimmer emerged. Larger, its hull pulsing with red light. Not a scout, but a command unit. Lyra's face paled. Draven's elite guard, she whispered, fear creeping into her voice for the first time. They're here for us for the river. Jace's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a skirmish anymore, it was a declaration of war. He grabbed his sidearm, its charge low but still deadly, and stood tall, the sisters rallying behind him. In a flash of inspiration, Jace pointed to the river. Nara, can you amplify the river's pulse? Blind them completely. She nodded, sweat beading on her brow, and plunged her hands deeper into the water. The river roared, erupting in a blinding wave of light that engulfed the oasis. The command skimmer faltered, its sensors overloaded, and Jace seized the moment, firing his last EMP. The machine crashed, its explosion shaking the ground, but not before it sent a distress signal skyward, a beacon to Draven's fleet. As the dust settled, the oasis was a battlefield of smoldering wrecks and glowing water. Jace and the sisters stood panting, their bodies pressed close in the aftermath, adrenaline and desire mingling in the air. Lyra's hand found his, her touch a lifeline. "You fought like a Zerathian," she said, her voice thick with emotion, her body leaning into his, close enough to feel her heartbeat. Zara's hand rested on his back, warm and possessive, while Nara's gaze held a quiet intensity, and Vexa's grin was all fire and promise. But the victory was fleeting. The distress signal meant more would come, stronger, deadlier. Jace looked at the sisters, their beauty stark against the wreckage, and felt a surge of purpose. They weren't just allies, they were his reason to fight, to love, to defy the stars. "We need to move," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Fortify the oasis, prepare for war." Lyra's lips brushed his ear, her whisper a thrill that cut through the fear. "With you, we'll burn brighter than the suns." The river pulsed, as if in agreement, and Jace knew this was only the beginning, a rebellion sparked by a lost pilot and 4 alien sisters, bound by battle and a passion that could shake the cosmos. The oasis lay bathed in the afterglow of battle, the river's ethereal light casting a surreal shimmer over the wreckage of Draven's skimmers. Jace Harlan stood at the heart of it, his chest heaving, sweat mingling with sand on his skin, his sidearm still warm in his hand. Lyra's whisper, "With you, we'll burn brighter than the suns," lingered like a pulse in his veins, her body close enough that he could feel the heat of her presence. Zara's possessive touch on his back sent sparks through him, while Nara's intense gaze held a quiet promise, and Vexa's fiery grin promised chaos and joy in equal measure. The sisters of Zerathia, radiant and fierce, stood with him, their bond forged in the crucible of combat. But the distress signal from the fallen command skimmer hung over them like a storm cloud, a warning that Draven's wrath was coming, faster, fiercer, and far more deadly. Jace's mind raced, plotting their next move. The oasis was their sanctuary, but it was exposed, a glowing beacon in the desert's vast emptiness. "We need to fortify this place," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. "More will come, bigger ships, better armed. We turn this valley into a fortress, or we're done for." He turned to the sisters, their luminous eyes reflecting the river's glow, and saw not just allies but something deeper, a connection that made his heart pound for reasons beyond survival. Lyra nodded, her regal composure unwavering, though her fingers lingered on his arm, a touch that felt both commanding and intimate. "The river's energy can shield us, but it needs time to recharge," she said, her voice a soft melody that contrasted with the urgency of their situation. "Your human ingenuity, Jace, it's our strength now." Her gaze held his, and for a moment the world narrowed to just them, her white hair glowing like a halo, her sheer gown clinging to her curves in a way that made his breath hitch. He forced himself to focus, but the memory of their kiss burned bright, a distraction he couldn't afford. Zara, ever the provocateur, stepped closer, her hips swaying as she surveyed the wreckage with a playful smirk. "Well, Flyboy, you've got us all hot and bothered after that fight," she teased, her voice dripping with suggestion. She kicked a piece of twisted drone metal, her pointed ears twitching as she leaned in, her lips dangerously close to his ear. "Building a fortress sounds fun, but don't think you're getting out of showing us more of those human tricks." Her finger traced a line down his chest, lingering just long enough to make his pulse spike. Jace coughed, his cheeks warming, caught between her boldness and the imminent threat. Nara, standing by the river, turned with a gentle smile that hid a spark of mischief. "Zara, let the man breathe," she said, her voice calm but laced with humor. She glided over, her silken dress shimmering, and handed Jace a smooth stone from the riverbank, its surface warm and faintly glowing. "This holds the river's essence," she explained, her fingers brushing his as she passed it to him, the contact sending a shiver through him. "It might help with your machines, or maybe it's just an excuse to get closer." Her opal eyes twinkled and Jace blinked, caught off guard by her subtle flirtation. Was she teasing him too? These sisters were going to be the death of him or the life. Vexa, never one to stay still, was already scrambling over the shelter's dome, inspecting Jace's handiwork with childlike enthusiasm. "This is so cool," she called, hanging upside down from a vine-wrapped beam, her white hair dangling like a curtain. "But Jace, your roof's got a hole. I can see the moons through it." She giggled, then promptly slipped, tumbling into a pile of sand with a squeak. Jace rushed over, heart lurching, only to find her laughing, sprawled out with her gown riding up, revealing more of her lithe form than he was prepared to handle. "Oops," she said, winking. "Guess I need a hero to save me from sand?" Jace groaned, rubbing his face, but a grin tugged at his lips. "You're all impossible," he muttered, helping Vexa up. Her hand lingered in his, her touch warm and playful, and he felt the weight of their attention, 4 sisters, each captivating in her own way, turning a life-or-death situation into a whirlwind of awkward, exhilarating moments. He shook his head, refocusing. "All right, let's get to work. We've got traps to set, defenses to build, and—" He glanced at Zara, who raised an eyebrow suggestively. "No time for distractions." The sisters laughed, a chorus of melodic voices that eased the tension, but the work was urgent. Jace led them in fortifying the oasis, his pilot's mind turning the landscape into a battlefield. He rigged more EMP traps using salvaged parts from the stellar fury, weaving them into the silver-leaf trees. Nara's glowing stones amplified the river's energy, creating a pulsating shield that shimmered like a mirage. Zara and Vexa used their telekinesis to move heavy rocks, forming a natural barricade around the valley, though Vexa kept accidentally dropping stones near Jace, giggling when he jumped out of the way. "Careful, Vexa," he called, dodging a boulder that landed with a thud. "You trying to bury me or flirt with me? Why not both?" She shot back, sticking out her tongue, her ears twitching with delight. Lyra, overseeing the work, hid a smile, but her eyes betrayed her amusement and something deeper, a warmth that made Jace's chest tighten. As they worked, the sisters shared more about Zerathia's fall. Draven, a warlord with a fleet of sentient warships, had betrayed their family, draining their world's core to fuel his conquests. The river, Lyra explained, was the last remnant of Zerathia's power, a conduit to their ancestors' strength. "If he takes it," she said, her voice trembling, "our legacy dies." Her hand found Jace's, squeezing tightly, and he felt the weight of her trust, her fear, her need. He squeezed back, a silent promise to fight for her, for them all. But the drama escalated when Zara, scouting the dunes, returned with a grim report. "There's a signal jammer out there," she said, her usual playfulness replaced by urgency. "It's blocking our comms, and it's close, too close." Jace's stomach dropped. A jammer meant Draven's forces were isolating them, cutting off any chance of outside help. Worse, it meant the next attack was imminent, likely a full assault. Jace led a small recon mission, taking Zara and Nara to locate the jammer. The desert night was cold, the twin moons casting eerie shadows. Zara stayed close, her body brushing his as they moved, her teasing whispers. "Don't get lost, flyboy," keeping the mood light despite the danger. Nara's presence was quieter, her hand occasionally grazing his, her calm grounding him. They found the jammer, a sleek, pulsating device buried in the sand, guarded by a single drone. Jace disabled it with a quick EMP, but not before it sent a pulse skyward, a signal that screamed their location to Draven's fleet. "Damn it," Jace muttered, kicking the device. "We're out of time." Zara grinned, undeterred. "Then we make it fun," she said, grabbing his hand and pulling him close, her lips hovering near his. "Nothing says rebellion like a little chaos, right?" Before he could respond, she kissed him, quick, fierce, tasting of danger and starlight. Jace's head spun, but Nara's soft laugh brought him back, her hand on his shoulder. "She's incorrigible," Nara said, but her eyes held a spark, as if she were considering her own move. Back at the oasis, the sisters rallied, their bond with Jace deepening with every shared glance, every fleeting touch. Lyra took his hand as they surveyed their defenses, her voice low. "You've given us hope, Jace," she said, her body pressed close, her warmth a contrast to the cold night. "But if we fall, I want you to know." She trailed off, her lips parting, and Jace felt the unspoken words, a confession, a desire, a vow. The moment was shattered by Vexa's shout. "Lights!" On the horizon. The sisters froze, their eyes wide. Jace grabbed his sidearm, heart pounding. The fleet was coming faster than expected. The oasis, their haven, was about to become a battlefield. As the sisters gathered around him, their hands touching his in a silent pact, Jace felt a surge of defiance. He was a human, a pilot, a survivor, and with these 4 extraordinary women, he'd fight to the last breath, laughing in the face of danger, tangled in a web of desire and destiny. The oasis trembled under the weight of impending war, the twin moons casting a silver glow over the fortified valley where Jace Harlan stood with the 4 sisters of Zerathia. The horizon flickered with the ominous lights of Draven's approaching fleet, their engines a low, menacing hum that promised destruction. Lyra's hand clung to Jace's, her touch a lifeline in the chaos, her unspoken words, love, hope, fear, hanging between them like a fragile thread. Zara's fiery kiss still burned on his lips, a bold claim that left his heart racing, while Nara's quiet strength and Vexa's playful energy wove a tapestry of connection that made the desert feel alive with possibility. Their defenses, EMP traps, telekinetic barriers, and the river's pulsing shield, stood ready, but the air was thick with tension, desire, and the electric promise of what might be their final night. As the sisters gathered around him, their bodies close in the shelter's dim light, Jace felt the gravity of their bond. These weren't just allies, they were a collision of worlds, human and alien, drawn together by survival and something deeper, more intoxicating. The river's glow seeped through the shelter's walls, casting their silhouettes in soft blues, highlighting the curves of their sheer gowns and the intensity in their eyes. Lyra stepped closer, her white hair shimmering, her breath warm against his cheek. "If this is our last stand," she whispered, her voice a velvet caress, "let us live fully, Jace. Let us feel everything." Her words sent a shiver through him, stirring a heat that had been building since their first kiss. He glanced at the others, Zara's mischievous smirk, Nara's gentle gaze, Vexa's eager grin, and felt the pull of their shared connection, a dance of trust and longing that defied the stars. The threat of Draven's fleet loomed, but in this moment the oasis was their universe, and they were its center. Zara moved first, her confidence a spark in the dimness. She slid behind Jace, her hands gliding over his shoulders, her touch light but deliberate, sending warmth through his worn flight suit. "You fought for us, flyboy," she murmured, her lips brushing his ear, her voice a teasing melody. "Now let us fight for you." Her fingers trailed down his back, slow and purposeful, igniting a fire that made him catch his breath. She pressed closer, her body soft yet commanding, her curves molding against him in a way that felt both forbidden and inevitable. Nara approached, her movements graceful, her opal eyes glowing with a quiet intensity. She took his hand, her touch cool and grounding, and guided it to her cheek, her skin like silk under his calloused fingers. "On Zerathia," she said softly, "we honor those who stand with us, in all ways." Her words were a promise, her gaze an invitation, and as she leaned in, her lips found his in a kiss that was tender yet electric, a slow burn that deepened with every heartbeat. Jace's hand slid to her waist, feeling the curve of her form through her sheer gown, and he marveled at how perfectly she fit against him, alien yet achingly familiar. Vexa, never one to be outdone, slipped into the circle, her laughter a bright note in the tension. "You're hogging him, Nara," she teased, nudging her sister aside. She wrapped her arms around Jace's neck, her body pressing close, her energy a whirlwind of warmth and mischief. "My turn," she whispered, her lips grazing his jaw, playful but deliberate, her breath hot against his skin. Her gown clung to her, damp from the river, revealing the lithe strength beneath, and Jace felt his resolve waver, caught in the spell of her vibrant allure. Lyra, ever the leader, watched with a knowing smile, her presence commanding even in silence. She stepped forward, her hand cupping Jace's face, her thumb tracing his lips. "You've given us strength, Jace," she said, her voice low, resonant with emotion. "Now let us give you ours." She kissed him, slow and deep, her body pressing against his, her curves a perfect harmony of power and grace. The kiss was a claim, a vow, a moment where the boundaries between human and Zerathian melted away, leaving only the raw connection between them. The shelter became a haven of intimacy, the river's glow casting a dreamlike haze. The sisters moved as one, their touches a symphony of warmth and exploration. Zara's hands roamed, teasing and bold, guiding Jace's fingers to the delicate ties of her gown, her laughter soft as she whispered encouragements that made his blood race. Nara's kisses were slower, deeper, her body a quiet anchor as she pressed closer, her breath mingling with his in a dance of trust. Vexa's energy was infectious, her touches playful yet intense, her giggles turning to soft gasps as she explored the unfamiliar terrain of human connection. Lyra, regal and passionate, led with a tenderness that belied her strength, her every movement a testament to the bond they were forging. The air was heavy with their shared breath, the shelter a cocoon where time seemed to pause. Each touch, each kiss was a celebration of survival, a defiance of the danger closing in. Jace, caught in their orbit, felt like a man reborn, his rugged edges softened by their alien grace. He was no stranger to passion, but this was different, cosmic, transcendent, a union that wove their souls together across the stars. Their gowns slipped away, revealing skin that glowed faintly in the river's light, and every moment was a delicate balance of fervor and reverence, a dance that honored their connection without crossing into the crude. Yet, even in this intimate sanctuary, the outside world intruded, A low tremor shook the ground, a distant explosion signaling the approach of Draven's forces. The sisters froze, their eyes wide, but their hands remained on Jace, a silent vow to face whatever came together. He pulled them close, his voice steady despite the heat still coursing through him. "We're not done yet," he said, his tone a mix of determination and warmth. Us, it's worth fighting for." Lyra nodded, her lips swollen from their kisses, her eyes fierce. "The river binds us," she said, her hand pressing against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "You've awakened something in us, Jace. We fight as one now." Zara's smirk returned, though softer, her fingers lingering on his arm. "You're stuck with us, flyboy," she said, her voice teasing but laced with affection. Nara's hand squeezed his, her gaze steady. "We're stronger together," she murmured, her touch a promise. Vexa, still catching her breath, grinned. "Let's make those invaders regret crashing our party." They dressed quickly, their movements fluid, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. Jace checked his sidearm, its charge nearly depleted, and glanced at the EMP traps outside. The river's shield pulsed weakly, drained from the earlier battle, but Nara's glowing stones offered a flicker of hope. As they stepped out into the night, the oasis glowed defiantly, a beacon of their unity. The fleet's lights were closer now, their shadows looming like predators. But Jace felt no fear, only a fierce resolve, fueled by the sisters' touch, their trust, their love. The air crackled with anticipation, the desert a stage for their rebellion. Lyra took his hand, her grip firm, her eyes blazing with purpose. "We'll hold this oasis," she said, her voice a rallying cry. "For Zerathia, for us." Zara's telekinetic pulse rippled through the air, Vexa's laughter echoed as she readied a trap, and Nara's quiet strength bolstered them all. Jace, the lost pilot, stood at their center, his heart entwined with theirs, ready to face the storm with a fire that burned brighter than ever. As the first enemy ships breached the horizon, their weapons charging with a deadly hum, Jace and the sisters stood united, their bond a weapon more powerful than any fleet. The night was alive with danger, but also with passion, a flame that would light their path through the coming war. The oasis stood defiant under the twin moons of the alien world, its glowing river a beacon of hope and rebellion against the encroaching shadows of Lord Draven's fleet. Jace Harlan, his heart still racing from the intimate moments shared with Lyra, Zara, Nara, and Vexa, gripped his sidearm tightly, its dwindling charge a grim reminder of their odds. The sisters stood with him, their bodies close, their presence a heady blend of strength and allure that fueled his resolve. Lyra's firm grip on his hand anchored him, her regal eyes blazing with determination. Zara's telekinetic pulse rippled through the air, a silent challenge to the enemy. Nara's quiet strength radiated from her touch, and Vexa's infectious grin lit up the night, her laughter a spark in the face of danger. The first enemy ships breached the horizon, their weapons humming with deadly intent, but Jace and the sisters were ready, their bond a fire that burned brighter than the stars. The air crackled with tension as the fleet descended. A swarm of sleek, predatory vessels casting long shadows across the dunes. Their hulls gleamed with a cold, metallic sheen, and their plasma cannons glowed with menace. Jace's traps, EMP charges woven into the silverleaf trees, were primed, and the river's shield, bolstered by Nara's glowing stones, pulsed faintly, a fragile barrier against the onslaught. "Hold the line," Jace said, his voice steady, his pilot's instincts sharpening his focus. "We hit them hard, then fall back to the river. It's our strongest asset." Lyra nodded, her white hair catching the moonlight, her sheer gown shimmering as she moved with regal grace. "The river is our lifeblood," she said, her voice a rallying cry. "We protect it no matter the cost." Her hand lingered on his, a touch that carried the weight of their shared kisses, their unspoken vows. Zara smirked, her telekinetic energy crackling as she prepared to strike. "Let's give these tin cans a show," she said, her eyes glinting with mischief and defiance. Nara's hands hovered over the river, her opal eyes focused, channeling its energy, while Vexa darted to a trap, her laughter defiant as she armed it with a flourish. The battle erupted with a ferocity that shook the valley. The lead ship fired a plasma volley, scorching the sand where Jace had stood moments before. He dove, pulling Lyra with him, their bodies pressed close in the chaos, her breath hot against his neck. "Stay sharp," he whispered, and she nodded, her eyes fierce but soft with trust. Zara unleashed a telekinetic wave, sending a drone spiraling into a dune, its explosion lighting the night. Vexa triggered an EMP, frying two more ships, their hulls sparking as they crashed. Nara's shield held, deflecting a barrage, but it flickered under the strain, her face pale with effort. Jace fired his sidearm, its last shots taking out a drone sensor array, but the enemy adapted, their AI learning fast. A massive warship loomed, its cannons charging for a devastating strike. Fall back, Jace shouted, grabbing Nara's arm as she swayed, her energy spent. The sisters moved as one, their bodies brushing his in the retreat, their touches a reminder of the passion that bound them. They reached the river's edge, its glow intensifying, as if sensing their desperation. But then the twist came, a shock that turned the world upside down. The warship's hatch opened, and a figure emerged, not in the armored suit of Draven's elite, but in a flowing robe that mirrored the sisters' gowns. A woman, her skin pale as moonlight, her white hair cascading like a river, her pointed ears unmistakable. She was Zerathian, regal, and eerily familiar. Lyra gasped, her hand tightening on Jace's. "Mira," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Our sister? We thought she was dead." Mira, the fifth sister, presumed lost in Draven's conquest, stepped onto the sand, her presence commanding yet haunting. Her opal eyes, like those of her sisters, locked onto Jace, and a strange smile curved her lips. "You've done well, sisters," she said, her voice melodic but edged with something darker. "And you, human, you've sparked a rebellion we couldn't." Her words were warm, but her gaze held a secret, a shadow that made Jace's instincts flare. The sisters rushed to her, their joy tempered by confusion. Zara's voice was sharp. "Mira, how are you here? Draven's forces?" Mira raised a hand, silencing her. "I survived," she said simply, but her eyes flickered to the warship, which powered down, its cannons falling silent. The other ships followed, hovering in eerie stillness. Jace's gut twisted. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "Mira, what have you done?" Nara asked, her voice soft but laced with dread. Vexa, usually so bold, clung to Jace's arm, her playful energy replaced by uncertainty. Lyra stepped forward, her regal poise faltering. "You're with them," she said, her voice breaking. "You've betrayed us." Mira's smile widened, but it was cold, devoid of the warmth Jace had come to know in her sisters. "Not betrayal," she said, her tone smooth as silk. "Survival. Draven offered me a choice, serve him or watch Zerathia burn. I chose power." She gestured to the fleet, and Jace realized the truth. She wasn't a prisoner. She was their commander. The distress signal hadn't been a mistake. It was her signal, luring her sisters into a trap. Jace's heart sank, but his mind raced, recalculating their odds. The sisters' faces were a mix of shock and pain, Lyra's eyes filled with tears, Zara's fists clenched with rage, Nara's hands trembling, Vexa's grin gone. "You led them here," Jace said, stepping forward, his voice low but firm. "You used us." Mira's gaze locked onto him, and for a moment he saw a flicker of regret, or was it amusement? "You're clever, human," she said. "Draven wants the river, but he's curious about you. A human who binds my sisters' hearts. Intriguing." The air grew heavy, the river's glow dimming as if mourning the betrayal. Lyra's hand found Jace's, her grip desperate. "We trusted you," she whispered, but her words were for Mira, not him. Zara's telekinetic energy flared, a warning, but Mira raised a hand, and an invisible force pushed Zara back, pinning her against a tree. "Don't," Mira said, her voice sharp. "I don't want to hurt you." Nara stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "Mira, the river is our soul. You'd give it to Draven?" Mira's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "The river is power," she said. "Draven will wield it, and I'll stand at his side. Join me, sisters. Join us, Jace, or die here." Jace's jaw tightened. He glanced at the sisters, their faces a storm of emotions, their bond with him a lifeline in this betrayal. "We don't kneel," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Not to Draven, not to you." He raised his sidearm, its charge gone, but its weight a symbol of defiance. The sisters rallied, their powers flaring, Lyra's shield, Zara's telekinesis, Nara's river energy, Vexa's fierce spirit. They stood with him, a united front against their lost sister. Mira sighed, her expression unreadable. "So be it," she said, and with a gesture the fleet powered up again, their cannons glowing. But Jace saw something in her eyes, a hesitation, a crack in her resolve. Was she truly lost, or was this another layer of the game? He didn't know, but he knew one thing: the oasis, their love, their rebellion was worth fighting for. As the ships advanced, Jace and the sisters braced themselves, their hands touching, their hearts entwined. The river pulsed, as if urging them to fight, and Jace felt a surge of human defiance, a spark that could ignite a revolution. "Let's show her what we're made of," he said, his voice a growl, and the sisters nodded, their eyes blazing with fire and love. The battle was far from over, and this betrayal only fueled their resolve to burn brighter than ever. The oasis quivered under the weight of Mira's betrayal, the glowing river casting an eerie light that flickered like a heartbeat caught between hope and despair. Jace Harlan stood shoulder to shoulder with Lyra, Zara, Nara, and Vexa, their hands brushing in a silent pact, their bond a defiant flame against the cold menace of Draven's fleet. Mira, the fifth sister, stood before them, her white hair flowing like a ghostly banner, her opal eyes gleaming with a mix of resolve and something softer. Regret, perhaps, or a flicker of the sister she once was. Her words, "Join me or die," hung in the air, sharp as a blade, but Jace's growl, "We don't kneel," had ignited a fire in the sisters, their powers flaring in unison. Lyra's shield pulsing, Zara's telekinetic waves crackling, Nara's river energy surging, and Vexa's fierce spirit a spark ready to explode. The fleet's cannons glowed, ready to unleash hell, but in the oasis, amidst the wreckage and the glowing water, Jace and the sisters were ready to fight, their hearts entwined in a rebellion that burned brighter than the twin suns. The tension was a living thing, wrapping around them as the ships hovered closer, their engines a low, predatory hum. Jace's sidearm was useless now, its charge spent, but his pilot's mind raced, piecing together a desperate plan. The EMP traps were depleted, the river's shield weakening, but the oasis itself, the terrain, the river, the sisters' powers, was their weapon. He glanced at Lyra, her regal poise unshaken despite the pain of Mira's betrayal, her hand still in his, her touch a steady anchor. "We use the valley," he whispered, his voice low but urgent. "Funnel them into the narrows, where their ships can't maneuver. Hit them with everything we've got." Lyra's eyes met his, fierce and trusting, her fingers tightening around his. "You lead, we follow," she said, her voice a melody of strength and longing. But her closeness, the way her sheer gown clung to her curves in the river's light, sent a flush of heat through him, an awkward distraction in the face of death. He cleared his throat, forcing focus, but Zara caught his glance, her smirk wicked. "Eyes on the fight, flyboy," she teased, her telekinetic energy rippling as she nudged him playfully, her hip brushing his in a way that made his pulse jump. "Or are you planning to charm the fleet into surrender?" Jace shot her a mock glare, a grin tugging at his lips despite the chaos. "Keep that up, Zara, and I'll make you man the traps," he said, earning a laugh that was equal parts defiance and flirtation. Nara, standing by the river, her hands glowing with its energy, gave a soft smile. "She's right, though," she said, her voice calm but laced with humor. "You do have a way of distracting us." Her opal eyes sparkled, and Jace felt his cheeks warm, caught off guard by her rare playfulness. Vexa, bouncing on her toes, chimed in, "Yeah, Jace, save the hero charm for after we win." She winked, then tripped over a vine, landing in a heap with a squeak. "Oops, okay, maybe I'm the distraction." The sisters' laughter, light and fleeting, cut through the tension, a reminder of their bond. But the moment shattered as the lead ship fired, a plasma bolt searing the sand near the shelter, sending them scrambling. Jace dove, pulling Vexa with him, her body pressed against his as they hit the ground, her giggle muffled against his chest. "My hero," she murmured, her breath warm, her eyes dancing with mischief despite the danger. Jace helped her up, his hand lingering on hers, and caught Lyra's amused glance. "Focus, you two," she said, but her tone held a warmth that made his heart skip. The battle erupted in a whirlwind of light and sound. Jace led the sisters to the valley's narrows, a choke point where the dunes rose high, forcing the ships into a tight formation. Zara unleashed a telekinetic blast, toppling a drone into its neighbor, their wreckage crashing in a fiery heap. Nara channeled the river's energy, sending a wave of light that blinded the ship's sensors, buying them time. Lyra's shield flared, deflecting a barrage, but it flickered, her face straining with effort. Jace grabbed her, steadying her, their bodies close, her scent, like wildflowers and ozone, filling his senses. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but urgent. She nodded, her lips brushing his cheek in a fleeting, heart-stopping moment. "With you, I am," she whispered, and Jace felt a surge of protectiveness, laced with desire. But the drama heightened as Mira joined the fray. She raised her hands, and a wave of energy, darker, more volatile than her sister's, swept through the valley, shattering one of Jace's traps. "You can't win," she called, her voice carrying over the chaos, her figure a haunting silhouette against the fleet's lights. Draven's power is absolute, yet her eyes, locked on Jace, held a flicker of doubt, as if his defiance stirred something she'd buried long ago. Jace seized the moment, shouting, "Vexa, the rocks!" Vexa grinned, her telekinesis hurling boulders into the narrows, crushing a ship's wing and forcing the fleet to stall. But the move left her exposed, and a drone fired, its bolt grazing her arm. She yelped, stumbling, and Jace sprinted to her, catching her before she fell. "I'm fine," she insisted, but her wince betrayed her pain. Jace tore a strip from his flight suit, wrapping her arm, his hands gentle but firm. "No heroics without me, got it?" he said, his tone teasing but his eyes fierce. Vexa stuck out her tongue, then leaned in, her lips brushing his in a quick, playful kiss. "Deal," she said, and Jace's heart raced, the awkward sweetness of the moment clashing with the battle's roar. Zara, seeing the exchange, laughed despite the chaos. "Oh, come on, Vexa, share the human," she called, dodging a plasma bolt with a graceful spin, her gown swirling to reveal a glimpse of her lithe form. Jace groaned, shaking his head. "You're all gonna kill me before Draven does," he muttered, but his grin betrayed his affection. Nara's soft laugh joined in, her hands still glowing as she bolstered the shield. "You're handling us just fine, Jace," she said, her voice warm, her touch on his arm a quiet spark that made him want to pull her close, battle be damned. The fight raged on, the sisters' powers weaving with Jace's tactics in a desperate dance. But Mira's presence was a wild card, her dark energy disrupting their rhythm. She targeted Lyra, sending a pulse that cracked the shield, forcing Lyra to her knees. Jace rushed to her, his arm around her waist, her body trembling against his. "I've got you," he said, his voice a low growl, and her eyes met his, full of pain and trust. "Don't let her win," she whispered, her hand cupping his face, her touch a lifeline. He kissed her palm, a promise, then turned to face Mira, his defiance a beacon. In a stroke of human ingenuity, Jace rigged a makeshift explosive from a salvaged fuel cell, tossing it into the Narrows. The blast shook the valley, toppling a ship and scattering the fleet, but Mira countered, her energy deflecting the debris. "You're persistent, human," she said, her voice almost admiring, but her next move was ruthless, a wave that pinned Zara against a rock, her gasp of pain cutting through Jace's heart. He roared, charging forward, only to be stopped by Nara's hand. "We need you alive," she said, her voice urgent, her body pressed close, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold fear gripping him. The awkwardness peaked as Vexa, now bandaged, tripped over a vine again, landing in Jace's arms with a laugh. "Okay, maybe I'm not cut out for stealth," she said, her eyes bright despite the chaos. Jace chuckled, setting her upright, but her closeness, her playful energy, stirred a warmth that clashed with the battle's intensity. The sisters teasing, their touches, their trust, it was a heady mix, making every moment a blend of danger and desire. As the fleet regrouped, Mira's voice rang out. "Last chance, sisters," she called, her tone wavering as if torn between duty and family. Jace saw the crack in her armor, the flicker of the sister she'd been. He stepped forward, Lyra at his side, their hands entwined. "We're not giving up," he said, his voice a challenge. "Not the oasis, not the river, not us." The sisters rallied, their powers surging, their bond with Jace a fire that refused to be extinguished. The battle was far from over, but in this moment they were unbreakable, ready to face whatever came next with courage, love, and a touch of human humor. The oasis stood as a defiant bastion under the twin moons, its glowing river pulsing like a heartbeat amidst the chaos of battle. Jace Harlan, flanked by Lyra, Zara, Nara, and Vexa, felt the weight of their bond, a fiery blend of courage, love, and defiance that burned brighter than the approaching fleet of Lord Draven. Mira's betrayal had cut deep, her dark energy a shadow over the valley, but her wavering tone hinted at a crack in her resolve. Jace's challenge, "We're not giving up," echoed in the air, met by the sisters' surging powers. Lyra's shield flaring, Zara's telekinetic waves crackling, Nara's river energy glowing, and Vexa's spirited defiance a spark that refused to fade. The fleet regrouped, their cannons charging with a deadly hum, but Jace and the sisters stood united, their hands brushing, their hearts entwined, ready to fight for the oasis, the river, and the love that had forged them into an unbreakable force. The battle reached a fever pitch, the valley a crucible of light and sound. Jace, his pilot's instincts razor-sharp, directed the sisters with a calm that belied the chaos. "Hit the lead ship," he shouted, pointing to a massive vessel looming over the Narrows. Zara grinned, her telekinesis sending a boulder crashing into its hull, sparks flying as it listed to one side. Nara channeled the river's energy, her hands glowing as she sent a pulse that scrambled the ship's sensors, blinding its cannons. Lyra's shield held firm, deflecting a barrage, her regal form steady despite the strain, her eyes locked on Jace with a trust that made his heart swell. Vexa, her arm bandaged but her spirit unbroken, darted between traps, triggering an EMP that fried a drone's swarm, her laughter a defiant melody in the night. But Mira was relentless, her dark energy a counterpoint to her sister's powers. She hovered above the sand, her robe billowing, her hands weaving patterns that sent shockwaves through the valley. "You can't stop progress," she called, her voice torn between conviction and pain. Yet Jace saw the hesitation in her eyes, the flicker of the sister who had once stood with Lyra and the others. He seized the moment, grabbing a salvaged communicator from the shelter, its signal weak but functional. "Mira," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're not Draven's puppet. You're Zerathian, you're their sister." Mira froze, her hands trembling, the dark energy faltering. Lyra stepped forward, her voice soft but piercing. "Mira, we love you, come back to us." Zara's eyes softened, her usual fire replaced by hope. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice breaking. Nara's hands glowed brighter, the river responding with a surge of light as if echoing their plea. Vexa, ever bold, added, Yeah, don't be a jerk, sis. We've got a human hero now. Join the fun. Her grin was infectious, and Jace couldn't help but chuckle, even as the fleet's cannons roared. The moment hung suspended, the battle pausing as Mira's gaze darted between her sisters and Jace. The fleet hesitated, its AI awaiting her command. Then, in a move that stunned them all, Mira lowered her hands, the dark energy dissipating like mist. Tears glistened in her opal eyes, and she stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. I thought I had no choice, she said, her words heavy with regret. Draven promised power, but I've lost everything. She looked at Jace, her expression softening. You, human, you've given them hope. Maybe you can give it to me too. Jace nodded, his heart pounding. Help us, Mira, fight with us. He extended a hand, and after a heartbeat she took it, her touch cool but firm, a bridge rebuilt across a chasm of pain. The sisters rushed to her, their embraces a tangle of tears and laughter, their bond mending in the glow of the river. Lyra's hand found Jace's, squeezing tightly, her eyes shining with gratitude. Zara hugged Mira fiercely, muttering, Don't scare us like that again, you idiot. Nara's gentle smile was a beacon, and Vexa, true to form, tackled Mira with a squeal, nearly knocking her into the sand. But the fleet, freed from Mira's command, reverted to its programming, its cannons charging for a final assault. Jace's mind raced, and he turned to Mira. You know their systems, he said. Can you shut them down? Mira nodded, her resolve hardening. The command ship has a central AI. If I can reach it, I can override its protocols. She glanced at her sisters, then at Jace, a spark of admiration in her eyes. You're more than I expected, human. The plan was desperate, but Jace thrived on desperate. With Mira's guidance, they launched a daring counterattack. Jace and Zara sprinted through the Narrows, dodging plasma bolts, her telekinesis shielding them as they climbed the wreckage of a fallen ship. Lyra and Nara bolstered the river's shield, its glow flaring to protect the oasis, while Vexa and Mira infiltrated the command ship, using Mira's knowledge to bypass its defenses. The sisters' powers wove together, telekinesis, energy pulses, and sheer will, while Jace's human ingenuity guided their strikes, turning the fleet's strength against itself. Inside the command ship, Mira hacked the AI, her fingers flying over alien controls, Vexa cheering her on with quips that made Jace laugh despite the danger. You're back, sis. Now make those tin cans dance, Vexa said, dodging a drone's fire. Mira's lips twitched, a hint of her old self returning, and with a final command she shut down the fleet's weapons, their cannons falling silent. The ships hovered, aimless, their threat extinguished. The oasis erupted in cheers as the sisters reunited, their embraces a celebration of survival and redemption. Jace stood among them, his heart full, their touches, Lyra's hand in his, Zara's playful nudge, Nara's gentle squeeze, Vexa's enthusiastic hug, and Mira's tentative clasp. A constellation of connections that transcended worlds. The river glowed brighter, as if blessing their victory, its light bathing the valley in hope. As dawn broke, the twin suns rising over the dunes, Jace and the sisters stood by the river, its waters calm now, reflecting their faces. Lyra turned to him, her eyes soft, her voice a melody. You've given us more than victory, Jace, she said, her lips brushing his in a kiss that tasted of starlight and promise. You've given us a future. Zara smirked, leaning close. Yeah, and you're stuck with us now, flyboy. Nara's hand found his, her smile radiant. You're our home, she said simply. Vexa grinned, tugging his arm. Admit it, you love the chaos. Mira, quieter, added, Thank you, Jace, for reminding me who I am. Jace looked at them, 5 extraordinary women, their beauty and strength a testament to Zerathia's spirit, and felt a warmth that rivaled the sun's. I came here a lost pilot, he said, his voice steady, his heart full. Now I'm found, with you. He pulled them close, their laughter mingling, their bond a fire that would light the stars. The oasis, once a hideout, was now a beacon, a stronghold for a rebellion that would reclaim Zerathia. Jace and the sisters began rebuilding, their hands working together, their love a foundation stronger than any fortress. The river sang, its glow a promise of new beginnings, and as they faced the future, Jace knew this was no end but a start, a story of human defiance, alien passion, and a love that could conquer the cosmos.